Entrectinib approval was certainly welcomed by me because it gives our patients another option. Entrectinib approval was based on a combined analysis of 3 trials, which are called ALKA, STARTRK-1, and STARTRK-2. It is a very effective drug, and certainly a response rate of 78% is excellent. In addition, entrectinib has confirmed CNS efficacy, which is certainly important for our patients with oncogenic-driven cancers.
In terms of the management of ROS1 positive non-small cell lung cancer that's metastatic, there's been the development of several exciting therapies in ROS1 rearranged non-small cell lung cancer. As mentioned, crizotinib has been around for several years and, does have really good activity. Entrectinib has recently been approved for ROS1 rearranged non-small cell lung cancer. It was recently based. The approval was recently based on a pooled analysis of 3 studies with entrectinib, as it's also an NTRK and ALK inhibitor, and was studied in a cross-section of these patients. But when looking at the ROS1 patients in the ALKA-001, the STARTRK-1 and STARTRK-2 studies, overall response rates were over 70%, and duration of response on it came out to be, the median was 24.6 months. So, and I think the major advantage of entrectinib is that it does have additional CNS activity and CNS penetration. There are potential side effects. Weight gain was noted, neutropenia, some nervous system disorders such as paresthesias, GI upset with nausea, myalgia, dysgeusia, so taste changes, and attention disturbance as well. But overall, it's an excellent option for patients with ROS1 rearranged non-small cell lung cancer. In terms of the pharmacodynamics and pharmacokinetics of entrectinib compared to crizotinib and ceritinib, I think once again the big advantage is the CNS activity, and we've seen that. We've seen CNS activity play a role, for example, with alectinib and brigatinib versus crizotinib in ALK rearranged non-small cell lung cancer, osimertinib compared with erlotinib and gefitinib in EGFR mutant lung cancer, where those have become first-line treatments. And I think one could look at entrectinib in a similar way. It is a selective ATP competitive inhibitor of TRK, ROS1, and ALK. And does have great potency in terms of its pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, with maximal concentrations reached in 2 to 4 hours. Half-life is about 21 hours in the fed state, so it can be taken with food. And so it is a good option for these patients.
Coming now to entrectinib, recently developed and very, very potent NTRK and ROS inhibitor. We've seen great success with this agent in both NTRK fusion positive and ROS fusion positive cancers, including, of course, a fair number of lung cancers, especially with ROS. And this is an agent that's very potent and also very, very selective. So it doesn't have a whole lot of off-target side effects. It's a very safe molecule. It's also designed to be CNS penetrant, which is very, very important in the management of these patients. Non-small cell lung cancer has a great predilection for CNS metastasis, and in particular, EGFR, ALK, ROS positive cancers have a great likelihood of ultimately metastasizing to the CNS too. So having targeted agents with CNS penetrance is critical, and entrectinib is a molecule that fits that profile and has shown great efficacy in the combined analysis of the phase 1 and phase 2 studies, showing a PFS of around 19 to 20 months, and also great benefit both in the overall group of patients, but very specifically patients with CNS disease, with a response rate surpassing 50% in the CNS, and the duration of response very substantial, maybe a year or so in the CNS as well. So very, very active, highly promising agent for the management of ROS translocation positive non-small cell lung cancers. Well, I think we're all fortunate to be able to witness the management of patients now with this targeted agent, and especially ALK and ROS positive cancers stand out as having great benefits from ALK and ROS targeting drugs. Crizotinib, of course, is sort of the historical molecule that we've used, for these patients with great success. In fact, some of the longest responders amongst advanced lung cancers tend to be patients with ROS translocation positive disease. Entrectinib seems to have a profile very analogous to that of crizotinib in terms of overall benefit, and has the advantage of the CNS penetration, and that's very significant for this particular subset of patients. I think it's a very favorable asset, to entrectinib, and offers a great alternative for the management of our patients with ROS fusion positive non-small cell lung cancer.
Overall response rate to entrectinib in the entrectinib trials were 78%. Responses were durable, with median duration of response of almost 25 months. What I think it's important to see that responses were seen in patients with and without brain metastasis, and a median progression-free survival was 19 months. We also see that entrectinib appears to have a very good CNS penetration with intracranial overall response rate of 55%. Entrectinib is well tolerated, even though nearly all the patients in that trial experienced adverse events. Majority of the adverse events were grade 1 or 2. There are certain adverse events which are expected for NTRK inhibitors, and those are called on-target treatment emergent adverse events, which we think are due to inhibition of TRK. And those are dizziness, sometimes perioral numbness. Interestingly enough, TRK TKI also cause weight gain in our patients due to inhibition of TRK pathway. Despite the fact that some of the patients had adverse event, discontinuation was very rare in that trial. Only 3% of the patients discontinued the drug due to adverse events. About a third of the patients required dose interruption, and about 20% required dose reduction. And evidence of serious adverse events was also very low, about 9%. So overall, entrectinib is well tolerated by our patients. I have experience with entrectinib, and I've given it for both ROS1 rearranged as well as NTRK rearranged cancers. And my experience is very similar to what has been described. Again, dizziness is something we commonly see, perioral numbness. Another interesting side effects that we see for the NTRK inhibitors, if you hold the drug for one or another reason, your patient can actually experience pain. And it's important to be aware of that withdrawal symptoms and then manage that pain with any kind of pain medications you have in your hands.
Intracranial response is important, particularly in patients with CNS disease or in oncogene-driven lung cancers that have a propensity to develop CNS disease. So it can be a sanctuary site for recurrence as well. And so I do think it's a very good option for patients with ROS rearranged non-small cell lung cancer, particularly regarding the CNS activity. I think particularly as a potential sanctuary site. And I look at it like I do, like I said, alectinib and brigatinib and ALK rearranged lung cancer, osimertinib and EGFR mutant lung cancer. The longer you can forestall metastases to the brain, the better off you are. And I think also the other thing is for small asymptomatic brain mets, if you could forestall radiation to the brain, I mean, these are patients that are living, sometimes 4, 5, 6 years and longer. So if you have to do brain radiation up front, particularly whole brain radiation, you're really risking some serious neurocognitive toxicities down the road, where if you gave a TKI that has CNS activity, you'd be able to forestall that and then potentially save the patient from some really life impactful toxicities down the road.
The molecule, it's a drug that's easy for patients to take. Simple administration schedule, once a day, 600 milligrams, if I remember correctly, can be taken with or without food. And the side effect profile is very favorable. Whenever we look at studies of these targeted compounds, it's nice to see the number of patients who needed to dose reduce due to side effects, and also important to look at the number of patients who had to stop drug due to adverse events. And those percentages are very low with entrectinib. It's a very well-tolerated compound. That being said, it's important to remember that it also blocks the NTRK pathway, and that's an important pathway in the CNS, and that explains some of the unique side effects of the molecule, as well as, honestly, any molecule blocking the TRK pathway. And that can be CNS side effects such as dizziness, also neuromuscular side effects such as neuropathies, as well as polyphagia, interestingly, and potentially weight gain as a result. So these patients have a very good appetite, which is nice on a certain level, but it can sometimes yield to significant weight gains.